There's a saying in markets that the bond market is the truth. US President Trump has been rattled recently, not by the drop in equity markets, but by the sell off in the bond market. You can see here, originally, when the tariffs started to emerge, you started to see US 10-year yields moving lower. That's a typical risk off move. Bonds are being bought, that sends the yields lower. That makes US debt easier to manage. It means interest payments are smaller. And US President Trump was quite happy with that. In fact, wanted to see the yield moving lower. It just makes debt payments much easier, future budgeting more convenient, and is a big relief to the US administration. However, this is what the turnaround in Trump's tariff negotiations was about. It's about the bond market. Now, there's a saying in financial markets that the bond market is the truth. In other words, bond traders tend to be looking, 6 months, 12 months plus into the future, long-term investing of large funds. So their settled moves are seen to be much more indicative of how the economy is really doing. And this is all that US President Trump needed to know. This big surge in US 10-year yields. In other words, investors weren't happy to buy US debt. Typically, in recent years, when markets have been very worried, they're very happy to buy US Treasuries. It's seen as a very safe, secure debt to buy. But all of a sudden, markets are saying, no, sell America. We don't want to buy US Treasuries. So, what to look at this week is we've got a bond market auction, the 20-year bond market, on Wednesday. This is going to give us a really good idea about how investors are now feeling about the state of the US administration, the approach of US President Trump on tariffs. And what you want to look for here is ideally we want to see yields moving lower. That will indicate a little bit more calm. If we see these US 10-year yields continue to move higher and simultaneously we're seeing the dollar moving lower, that's a sign of distress. Remember Liz Truss in the UK when there was a big wobble in the bond market and we saw a big surge and a big sell-off in UK gilts and the Bank of England had to intervene to stop a big crash of the UK economy? It's that kind of reality that politicians fear. And this is what US President Trump, at the end of the day, all politicians will have to be serving the bond market because the bond market is the truth. So look at this Wednesday auction and you'll get an idea. If there's strong demand here, the market will find that reassuring. If there's very weak demand here, that could bring back selling into markets on stagflationary and longer term fears about US debt.